Alright, let's talk about one of the greatest mysteries buried within the endless wars and forgotten histories of the Imperium. Warhammer 40K is a universe where myths and half-truths blend into reality, where legends shape the future just as much as they obscure the past. And among all the enigmas surrounding the God Emperor of mankind, there's one question that keeps surfacing. What was the greatest weapon he ever lost? It's easy to assume that when we say weapon, we mean some kind of ultimate war machine, an unfathomably powerful relic of a bygone age. But what if the answer isn't that simple? What if this lost weapon was never a thing at all, but a person, a philosophy, or something so dangerous that even the Emperor himself had to ensure it vanished from history? Think about it. The Emperor was a being of unparalleled power, possessing knowledge that dwarfed even the most advanced Xenos civilizations. He orchestrated the Great Crusade, engineered the Primarchs, and waged war against gods and demons alike. If he truly lost something, whatever it was, it must have been catastrophic in scale. And that's exactly why the mystery still lingers, because the implications are terrifying. Some believe it was a physical weapon, something so devastating that its very existence threatened the Imperium itself. Others suggest it was an idea, a lost secret of the Emperor's great plan, something that could have changed the course of history if it had survived. But one thing is certain. Whatever was taken from him, whatever vanished into the shadows of time, its absence has shaped the Imperium in ways we may never fully understand. So let's dive deep. Let's explore the theories, the whispers, the lost fragments of knowledge scattered across the grim darkness of the 41st millennium. Because if we can uncover what the Emperor's greatest lost weapon truly was, we might just understand what the Imperium was meant to be and what it was supposed to become. Why would something as powerful as the Emperor's greatest weapon simply vanish? That's the real question, isn't it? We're not talking about some minor relic lost in the shuffle of the Imperium's bureaucratic nightmare. We're talking about something so significant that its disappearance altered history. And if there's one thing we know about the Warhammer universe, it's that when something this big is erased, it's never by accident. The first thing to consider is whether this was truly a weapon in the conventional sense. Maybe it was a devastating piece of technology, some lost artifact from the dark age of technology that even the Mechanicum couldn't reclaim. Or maybe it was something less tangible, an idea, a being, a force that had the potential to change everything. If that's the case, its loss wasn't just a matter of misplacing a superweapon. It was deliberate. Someone, somewhere, made sure it would never be seen again. There are countless ways something can disappear in the Imperium. Records are purged, names are erased, entire worlds are subjected to exterminatus when the powers that be decide they contain something too dangerous to exist. The Adeptus Administratum, the Inquisition, and the Emperor himself have all rewritten history when it suited their needs. And if the weapon in question was truly the Emperor's greatest, its erasure would have been absolute. No one would have been allowed to remember. No records would remain, just whispers, fragmented myths, and theories among those who dare to dig too deep. Some fans argue that if this was a physical weapon, it was lost during the chaotic days of the Horus heresy. That war upended everything, leaving the Imperium shattered, and in the turmoil, even the Emperor's most powerful tools could have been destroyed, stolen, or hidden away. The War Master's betrayal brought about a dark age where truth and deception blurred, and it's entirely possible that this so-called weapon was taken or buried beneath the weight of history as the Imperium struggled to survive. But here's the thing. If this weapon was just another Titan-class war machine or a devastating fleet of starships, why would it be erased so completely? The Imperium loses technology all the time, but it never tries to erase its existence. Even the Men of Iron, the infamous AI rebellion of the Dark Age of technology, are still acknowledged as a cautionary tale. So whatever the Emperor's lost weapon was, it wasn't just dangerous. It was dangerous in a way that required its total removal from the records. That's why so many theories suggest it was something more than just a tool of war. What if it was a lost Primarch? A being who held knowledge or power that could have undone the Emperor's grand vision? Or what if it was something that made him second-guess his own path? An idea, a philosophy that threatened to unravel the Imperium before it was even fully formed. Some believe it could have been a psionic experiment, a secret project involving warp manipulation so unstable that it had to be locked away forever. Others whisper about forbidden weapons of the Dark Age, things even the Emperor feared, machines with intelligence, or worse, entities bound to mechanical shells in ways that defied understanding. Theories run wild because the Imperium never forgets anything useful. If something is erased this thoroughly, it means it was meant to be forgotten. But forgotten by whom? Did the Emperor himself order its destruction, fearing what it could do? Or was it taken from him, and those who wielded it made sure its memory was wiped from existence? Could it still be out there, hidden away in the darkest corners of the galaxy, waiting to be uncovered? This is where things get even more interesting. Because if something of this magnitude was truly lost, then there's always the possibility that it could be found again. And that's a terrifying thought, isn't it? If this weapon, whatever it was too dangerous for the Emperor to wield, what happens if it falls into the wrong hands? If we're trying to figure out what the Emperor's greatest lost weapon really was, we need to start by breaking down the possibilities. And let's be honest, this is Warhammer 40k, where weapon could mean anything from a planet-destroying supergun to a concept so dangerous that it had to be wiped from history. So what are the main candidates? What could have been so powerful, so uncontrollable, that even the Emperor, who created demigod warriors, crushed entire civilizations and defied the gods themselves, either lost it, had it stolen, or was forced to abandon it? The most obvious place to start is a literal weapon, some kind of technology or artifact from the Dark Age of technology, the mythical era when humanity reached its peak before it all came crashing down. The Mechanicum has spent millennia trying to recover lost wonders from that time, and we know that even during the Great Crusade, the Emperor sought out forbidden technology. So what if he found something truly apocalyptic? A weapon that made the Exterminatus look like a firecracker? A device so devastating that, in the wrong hands, it could unmake the galaxy? Some believe it could have been an anti-warp weapon, something capable of erasing demons and chaos itself. Imagine that for a second. If such a thing existed, the Emperor could have wiped out the ruinous powers before they ever became a real threat. But here's the catch. If such a weapon was ever real, why didn't he use it? Was it unstable? Did it have consequences even he couldn't predict? Or did someone, take it from him before it could be deployed? Then there's the theory that this wasn't a weapon in the traditional sense at all, but a person. And when you think about it, that makes a disturbing amount of sense. The Emperor's greatest creations were his Primarchs, and we already know that 2 of them were erased from history. Could one of them have been the lost weapon? Not just a warrior, but something more. A being who held a secret, a power so overwhelming that they had to be wiped from existence? There's also the idea that it wasn't a Primarch, but something even older. The Emperor walked the Earth for tens of thousands of years before the Imperium was founded. What if, in that time, he created something, an experiment, a life form, something that defied the natural order? If it was meant to be his ultimate tool, his ace in the hole, but something went horribly wrong. Well, we've seen that pattern before, haven't we? And then there's another kind of lost weapon, one that isn't tangible at all. What if the real weapon the Emperor lost wasn't an object or a person, but a philosophy? A path he could have taken but didn't? There are whispers in the lore that suggest the Emperor had grander plans for humanity, that he intended something far beyond the brutal, stagnant Imperium that ultimately took shape after his fall. Maybe he once had a way to unify humanity without war, a vision of the future that didn't rely on endless conquest and repression. If that's the case, then his greatest lost weapon wasn't some doomsday device. It was hope. This is where things get really messy. Because if we're talking about something conceptual, then the loss of this weapon wasn't just a setback. It was the moment everything changed. If the Emperor lost the one thing that could have made the Imperium something greater, then the grim, oppressive nightmare of the 41st millennium isn't just a tragedy. It's a mistake. A course correction that never happened. And that's something a lot of fans wrestle with, because it suggests that everything, the war, the suffering, the never-ending darkness, might have been avoidable. Of course, there's always the chance that we're looking at this from the wrong angle. What if the greatest lost weapon was something that wasn't destroyed, but hidden? Maybe it's still out there waiting. Maybe it's something the Emperor planned for, something that was never meant to be used until the right moment. And if that's the case, then the real question isn't what the lost weapon was, but whether it's going to return. If we're talking about the Emperor's greatest lost weapon, one of the most straightforward explanations is that it was a physical superweapon, something forged for war, a device or artifact of unparalleled destructive capability that somehow vanished from history. And considering the scale of devastation already present in Warhammer 40K, whatever this thing was, it had to be on an entirely different level. The most popular theory among fans is that this weapon came from the Dark Age of technology, a time when humanity's knowledge of war-making was so advanced that even the Adeptus Mechanicus today can only dream of rediscovering a fraction of it. Think about the kind of devastation we already see in the Imperium, the planet-annihilating power of Exterminatus, the sheer might of a warlord titan, the apocalyptic fury of the Phosphex weapons. If those are just remnants of what humanity once wielded, imagine what the Emperor could have found buried in the ruins of that lost golden age. Some believe it was a ship, perhaps something beyond even the Phalanx, Dorne's mighty fortress monastery, or the black-stone fortresses used by Abaddon. What if the Emperor discovered a void craft capable of obliterating entire sectors with a single volley, something that could have ensured humanity's dominance over the galaxy before Chaos or Xenos ever became a real threat? If such a ship existed and then vanished, the question is why? Was it sabotaged? Did it fall into the wrong hands? Or was it so dangerous that the Emperor himself had no choice but to destroy it? Then there's the possibility of a weapon like the fabled Silica Animus, a legend of a forbidden machine god, an AI-controlled war engine that could think, adapt, and wage war beyond the limits of human strategy. The Men of Iron were already terrifying enough, nearly wiping out humanity before the Emperor's rise. But what if he had found something even worse? A relic of the past that could have turned the tide of war, but at a cost so severe that it had to be erased. Others speculate that the lost weapon was more of a personal tool, something the Emperor himself wielded. Maybe it was a relic from Terra's ancient past, a blade or warhammer beyond even the craftsmanship of the Mechanicum, infused with the very essence of his power. Some have even suggested that it could have been an early prototype of the Black Sword, wielded by the Emperor's champion in the modern era, a blade that cuts through chaos itself. But if such a weapon once existed, why don't we hear about it? Why would the Emperor ever let something that powerful slip from his grasp? There's also the disturbing idea that this wasn't just a war machine, but something alive. We know the Imperium has experimented with biomechanical weapons before, and we know the Emperor himself dabbled in creations beyond human comprehension. What if this weapon was something more akin to a living construct, a creature or being bred specifically for war? If it was lost, was it because it turned against its creator? Did it escape into the void, waiting for the right moment to return? The fact that we don't know suggests one of two things. Either the Emperor himself erased its existence, or it was stolen from him by something powerful enough to keep it hidden. If it was the former, then the most logical conclusion is that the weapon was too dangerous, something that could have either doomed the Imperium or corrupted it beyond recognition. But if it was the latter, if something took it and hid it away, then the question isn't just what it was, but who has it now? And that might be the most terrifying possibility of all. Now, what if the Emperor's greatest lost weapon wasn't a machine, but something alive? Something engineered, grown, or even born with a purpose so grand and terrible that its very existence was erased. This is where things get really interesting, because if we follow this line of thought, we're not just talking about a superweapon, We're talking about a living, breathing entity, something that could think, evolve, and act on its own. And that opens up a whole new level of terrifying possibilities. The most obvious candidate here is the lost Primarchs. We already know that 2 of them were completely erased from history, their legacies wiped so thoroughly that even their own brothers dare not speak their names. If one of them was the Emperor's ultimate weapon, then what happened? Were they too powerful, too unstable, or did they turn against him in a way that not even the heresy could compare to? It's one thing to erase a rogue general or a failed experiment, but to delete an entire Primarch and his legion suggests something far worse, something that the Imperium itself could never afford to acknowledge. Some fans speculate that one of these lost Primarchs may have been the Emperor's secret attempt at something beyond even Astartes, a being with psychic potential so vast that it could rival the Chaos Gods themselves. The Emperor was always looking for ways to control the warp, to use its power without being consumed by it. What if he succeeded, but in doing so, created something he could no longer control? A being of pure psionic energy, something that could have changed the fate of humanity but also carried the risk of annihilating it? If such a creature existed and was lost, then it makes sense why it was buried so deeply in secrecy, because the alternative was unthinkable. And then there's the darker possibility. What if the Emperor's greatest lost weapon wasn't a Primarch at all, but something even stranger? The Imperium has a long history of genetic experimentation, pushing the boundaries of what is possible with human biology. The Adeptus Mechanicus has dabbled in cloning, in hybrids, in things that should never exist. And the Emperor himself was no stranger to these practices. After all, he engineered the Primarchs, created the Thunder Warriors before them, and experimented with all manner of psionic enhancements. What if, at some point, he created something new? A being meant to be the perfect soldier, the perfect psychic weapon, or even something beyond human comprehension? There are whispers in the lore about projects that never saw the light of day, about hidden laboratories beneath the palace on Terra, where the Emperor conducted experiments in secret. Some believe that whatever he created was so dangerous, so unpredictable, that it had to be destroyed before it could be unleashed. The idea of a living weapon also ties into another theory, one that suggests the Emperor may have tried to harness Xenos DNA, or even chaos itself, to create something greater than humanity. It sounds insane, right? But think about it. The Emperor was always obsessed with achieving total dominance over the galaxy, and we know he had no problem using methods that others would consider heretical. The Navigator gene, the creation of the Sensei, his manipulation of psychers, all of it suggests a willingness to push beyond human limits. What if, at some point, he went too far? The most chilling possibility is that this living weapon wasn't lost in the sense of being destroyed, but that it's still out there. Maybe it escaped, maybe it was hidden away, maybe it's been waiting, evolving, growing stronger in the shadows of the galaxy. If that's the case, then the question isn't just what it was, but whether it's coming back. And if it does, will it be humanity's salvation or its doom? When it comes to lost weapons, one of the most terrifying possibilities isn't a sword, a ship, or even a genetically engineered super being. It's technology. And not just any technology, but something from the dark age of technology, an era so advanced that even the Imperium's greatest minds today are little more than scavengers picking through its scraps. If the Emperor's greatest lost weapon was technological, then it wasn't just powerful, it was something that could have rewritten the fate of humanity entirely, and that's exactly why it had to disappear. The idea that humanity once wielded technology far beyond what exists in the 41st millennium isn't just a theory, it's canon. Before the Age of Strife, mankind had artificial intelligence, automated war machines, and weapons so advanced that they could likely wipe out entire star systems with a single command. But something went horribly wrong. The Men of Iron, those legendary AI war machines, turned on their creators, leading to one of the bloodiest conflicts in human history. By the time the Emperor rose to power, all artificial intelligence had been outlawed. its very existence seen as a threat too great to ever be allowed again. But what if the Emperor had found something even worse? What if, during the Great Crusade, he uncovered remnants of a technological horror so great that even he feared what it could do? Some fans believe that the greatest lost weapon wasn't a machine of destruction, but something more insidious. A self-evolving artificial intelligence, one that could outthink, outmaneuver, and outfight any organic life form. A true machine god, something that could have either secured humanity's dominance over the galaxy or consumed it entirely. Think about it. The Adeptus Mechanicus worships the machine god, yet they fear true AI. They cling to ancient relics, treating technology as sacred rather than understanding it. Why? Because something in their past traumatized them so deeply that they never recovered. What if that something wasn't just the Men of Iron, but something even worse, something that the Emperor himself had to bury? A machine intelligence so powerful that it could have shattered the Imperium before it even began. There's also the theory that this lost weapon wasn't an AI in the traditional sense, but rather a piece of technology so advanced that it functioned on an entirely different level, something that blurred the lines between the warp and reality, between matter and thought. We already know that the Emperor sought to master the warp, to find ways to control its power without succumbing to its corruption. What if, in his quest, he found or built something that could do just that? A device capable of bending the fabric of the Immaterium itself, a weapon that could have either saved humanity from chaos or destroyed reality as we know it. If such a thing existed, then its disappearance makes sense. Either it was stolen, locked away, or destroyed before it could be used. And if it was destroyed, then it means the Emperor himself saw it as a threat too great to risk. But what if it wasn't destroyed? What if it's still out there, buried beneath the ruins of a forgotten world, waiting to be found? The scariest part? If this lost weapon was technology, especially something tied to AI or the warp, then someone, somewhere, is still looking for it. The Imperium might have buried it, but the galaxy is full of scavengers, heretics, and beings who would do anything for power. And if one of them ever finds it, the Imperium might face a threat even greater than chaos itself. What if the Emperor's greatest lost weapon wasn't a thing, a person, or a machine, but an idea? A philosophy, a strategy, a way of thinking so powerful that its absence changed the course of history. It sounds almost abstract compared to the other theories, but when you really think about it, it makes an unsettling amount of sense. Because in Warhammer 40K, ideas are just as dangerous as weapons, sometimes even more so. The Imperium as we know it is a brutal, decaying theocracy, a place where ignorance is enforced, progress is feared, and humanity clings to survival through sheer violence and repression. But was that always the plan? Many fans believe the Emperor had a completely different vision for humanity, one that never came to pass. A future that was meant to be, but was lost somewhere along the way. What if that future, whatever it was the true missing weapon? We know that during the Great Crusade, the Emperor was pushing a strict atheistic philosophy. The imperial truth rejected all gods, all superstition, all belief in anything other than science, reason, and the supremacy of mankind. It was a vision of a galaxy ruled by rationality, where humanity no longer feared the dark. And yet, that vision failed spectacularly. By the time of the 41st millennium, the Imperium is built entirely on faith. The Emperor himself is worshipped as a god. The very thing he tried to prevent became the foundation of everything. So what happened? Was the imperial truth flawed from the start? Or was there something more? An element of the Emperor's plan that was lost, erased, or abandoned? Some theorists believe that he had a deeper strategy, something beyond the Great Crusade. Maybe he intended to phase out war entirely, to create a system where humanity no longer needed an endless cycle of conquest just to survive. Maybe he had a method of elevating mankind beyond its limits, something that wasn't just about raw military power, but about real lasting stability. If that's true, then the loss of this idea wasn't just a setback, it was a catastrophe. Because instead of leading humanity into an age of enlightenment, the Imperium became a stagnant nightmare. And if this lost philosophy had survived, then maybe the Imperium wouldn't be what it is today. Maybe the Imperium wouldn't even need to exist. Some go even further, suggesting that the Emperor might have once had a way to truly unite humanity, not through fear, not through war, but through something greater. A form of control so perfect that rebellion would be unnecessary. Maybe it was psychic in nature, a way to bring all of mankind under a single will without oppression. Or maybe it was something else entirely, a system of governance, a philosophy of power that was lost before it could be realized. But here's where things get really dark. If such an idea existed, then someone must have buried it. The Imperium has spent 10,000 years erasing things it doesn't want people to know, rewriting history to fit its needs. What if this lost weapon, the Emperor's greatest idea, was erased on purpose? Not by aliens, not by chaos, but by those who now rule in his name. The High Lords of Terra, the Ecclesiarchy, the ones who thrive in a galaxy of ignorance and fear. If the Emperor once had a vision that could have freed mankind from endless war, then these are the people who would have every reason to ensure it never saw the light of day. And that's the real tragedy, isn't it? Because if this theory is true, then the greatest weapon the Emperor ever lost wasn't a gun, a ship, or a psychic titan. It was the one thing that could have saved humanity from the nightmare it's trapped in now. And the worst part? We might never know what it was. If the Emperor's greatest lost weapon was something that could have changed the course of history, then the most obvious moment where it could have mattered was the Horus heresy. That was the breaking point, the single most devastating event in human history, the moment when the Emperor's grand vision shattered into ruin. So if this weapon, whatever it was, had still been in play, could it have stopped Horus? Could it have changed everything? It's impossible to ignore how perfectly timed the heresy was. Just as the Imperium had conquered the stars, just as the Great Crusade was reaching its peak, Horus turned, and with him, half the legions. The Emperor was forced to abandon his work on the Webway project, forced into a war that he never expected, and in the end, forced into the Golden Throne, leaving humanity to rot under the rule of bureaucrats and zealots. It almost feels orchestrated, doesn't it? Like something had been removed from the board, something that could have tipped the balance before the first shots were even fired. One of the biggest theories is that this lost weapon, whether it was a technology, a person, or a philosophy, was meant to be the Emperor's final safeguard. A trump card that could have prevented the heresy before it even started. Some believe it was a weapon designed specifically to counter chaos, something that could have eliminated the ruinous power's influence before they managed to corrupt Horus. Imagine if the Emperor had access to a device that could sever a Primarch's connection to the warp, cutting off the whispers of the dark gods before they could take root. If something like that existed and was lost, then Horus's fall starts to look less like destiny and more like a preventable tragedy. Then there's the possibility that this lost weapon was a person, one of the missing Primarchs, or maybe even something beyond them. A figure who could have served as a counterweight to Horus, someone who could have kept the other Primarchs united when doubts began to creep in. We already know that the Emperor wiped 2 of his sons from history. What if one of them had been the perfect leader, a strategist or diplomat who could have held the Imperium together? If such a being once existed and was lost, then the heresy might not have been inevitable at all. It might have been a consequence of their absence. Some fans even speculate that this lost weapon was tied to the Webway project itself. The Emperor's ultimate goal wasn't just galactic conquest, it was to free humanity from the warp entirely. The Webway was supposed to be the Imperium's escape route, a way to travel the stars without relying on the navigators or the Astronomicon. If it had worked, chaos would have lost its grip on humanity. But then the project collapsed. The Webway was invaded by demons, and the Emperor was forced to sacrifice himself to hold the tide. What if the missing weapon was something that could have secured the Webway, something that could have completed the Emperor's work before the heresy ever reached Terra? And here's where things get even darker. If the weapon was lost because someone stole it, if it was taken, hidden, or deliberately erased, then that suggests that someone wanted the heresy to happen. The Dark Gods, the traitor Primarchs, even the High Lords of Terra after the war, any one of them could have had a reason to ensure that this ultimate safeguard was gone when it was needed most. Because the truth is, there are forces in the galaxy that benefit from an Imperium that is always on the edge of destruction. Chaos thrives on conflict. The Mechanicus thrives on secrecy. The Ecclesiarchy thrives on fear. If the Emperor had a way to secure humanity's future, there were plenty of forces, both mortal and immortal, who would have every reason to make sure it never saw the light of day. So was the Emperor's greatest lost weapon the key to stopping the heresy? Maybe, maybe not. But if it was, then that means we're not just looking at a mystery, we're looking at a theft. A piece of the Emperor's grand design ripped away at the most crucial moment. And if that's true, then the real question isn't just what was lost, but who took it, and whether it could ever be found again. If the Emperor's greatest lost weapon was so powerful, so game-changing, then why was it lost at all? What if it wasn't stolen, hidden, or misplaced, but deliberately destroyed? That changes everything. Because if something is erased that thoroughly, it means someone, maybe even the Emperor himself, decided it was too dangerous to exist. And that raises an even bigger question. Was it the right choice? Or was this the moment where everything went wrong? There's a real possibility that the Emperor himself destroyed it. And that thought alone is terrifying, because this is the same being who created the Primarchs, who engineered the Astartes, who sought to master the webway and cast down the gods of chaos. If even he looked at this weapon and decided it was too much, that says something about just how dangerous it was. Maybe it was a piece of lost technology, something that could have reshaped reality, but carried a cost even the Emperor couldn't justify. Maybe it was an artificial intelligence, a self-evolving machine intelligence that could have outgrown even his control. If the Emperor saw it as a threat to his great plan, then maybe wiping it from existence was his only option. But then again, what if it wasn't his decision? The Emperor wasn't the only force in the galaxy capable of erasing things from history. What if his enemies destroyed it before he could use it? Chaos would have had every reason to ensure that the most powerful weapon ever created never fell into the Emperor's hands. The traitor Primarchs, the forces of the Warp, even ancient Xenos civilizations like the Eldari could have played a role in making sure this ultimate tool never saw the light of day. And then there's the other possibility, one that fans have debated for years. What if it wasn't an enemy, but an ally? What if someone close to the Emperor, someone he trusted, made the choice to destroy this weapon, believing it was the only way to protect humanity? The Primarchs, despite their loyalty, weren't always aligned with their father's vision. Magnus acted against his will. Lorgar defied him and sought his own truth. What if another of his sons, or even Malkador, his most trusted advisor, saw the weapon and decided that it was too much, too dangerous, too unpredictable? It's not impossible to imagine a scenario where the Emperor created something he believed would save humanity, only for one of his own to look at it and see something else entirely, something that could destroy everything instead. Maybe it wasn't treachery. Maybe it was desperation. Maybe this weapon wasn't just a tool, but something alive, something with a will of its own. If that's the case, then destroying it wouldn't have been an act of malice. It would have been an act of mercy. There's also the question of whether the weapon was truly destroyed, or if that's just what we're meant to believe. Because if history has taught us anything, it's that nothing in Warhammer is ever truly gone. If the Emperor ordered its destruction, did it really happen? Or was it hidden away, locked in some vault beneath the Imperial Palace, buried on some long-forgotten world, waiting to be rediscovered? If it was his enemies who took it, did they really wipe it from existence? Or did they claim it for themselves, waiting for the right moment to strike? And that's the scariest thought of all. Because if something this powerful was meant to be erased, but still exists somewhere, then it means there's a reckoning coming. One day, Someone is going to find it. And when they do, the galaxy will never be the same. If the Emperor's greatest lost weapon still exists somewhere in the galaxy, then it's only a matter of time before it resurfaces. And when it does, it won't be subtle. Because something that powerful, something that could have changed the course of history, doesn't just stay buried forever. Whether it's a weapon, a philosophy, a person, or something even stranger, the implications of its return could shake the foundations of the Imperium, and maybe even tear it apart. The most obvious question is who would find it first. If the Imperium itself were to recover this lost weapon, would it even be able to use it? The Imperium of the 41st millennium is not the Imperium the Emperor envisioned. It's a bloated, superstitious corpse of an empire ruled by bureaucrats and zealots who would rather burn knowledge than understand it. Would they even recognize the weapon for what it is? Or would they destroy it out of fear, just as they have with so many other things that defy their dogma? There's a terrifying irony in the idea that the Imperium might already have the key to its salvation locked away in some vault, but lacks the vision to use it. Then there's the possibility that someone else gets to it first. Chaos would love nothing more than to corrupt something the Emperor once saw as his greatest asset. If this weapon was truly something that could shift the balance of power, then the Dark Gods would do everything in their power to twist it to their own ends. Imagine if the forces of chaos uncovered a lost Primarch or an ancient war machine of unfathomable power and turned it against the Imperium. The galaxy is already on the brink of collapse. This could be the final push into oblivion. And what about Xenos? The Eldari have walked the galaxy for eons, and their Farseers see the future clearer than anyone. If this lost weapon is something that could threaten reality itself, would they try to destroy it before it could be unleashed? Or would they attempt to manipulate it for their own survival? The Necrons, with their ancient knowledge of technology, might be the only ones capable of understanding what the Emperor had lost. And the Tyranids... well, if this weapon was biological or had anything to do with genetic mastery, then the hive mind might already be searching for it. But the scariest possibility, that it's not lost at all, that it's been waiting. Maybe the Emperor hid it away, knowing that the Imperium wasn't ready for it. Maybe it's locked in some stasis vault deep beneath Terra, waiting for the right moment. Or maybe it's something far worse, something that has been growing, changing, evolving in the shadows of the galaxy, waiting for its time to return. If that's the case, then the question isn't whether it will come back. The question is when, and that raises a terrifying possibility. What if the Emperor planned for this all along? What if this weapon, whatever it was always meant to return at humanity's darkest hour? The Imperium is already falling apart. The Great Rift has torn the galaxy in two. The Emperor's light is flickering. What if this missing weapon is the last piece of his grand design, the final ace up his sleeve? If so, then its return won't just change the Imperium, it will redefine everything. Or maybe, just maybe, it should have stayed buried. Because sometimes, the things we lose aren't meant to be found. If there's one thing we know about the Emperor, it's that he wasn't just powerful. He was a master strategist, a being who played the longest game imaginable. Every move he made, every conquest, every secret experiment, all of it seemed to be part of some grand design. Even now, trapped on the Golden Throne, his influence lingers in ways that defy logic. So if he lost something as important as his greatest weapon, could it really have been an accident? Or was it part of the plan all along? The idea that this weapon, whatever it was intentionally hidden rather than lost adds a whole new layer to the mystery. Maybe it wasn't stolen. Maybe it wasn't destroyed. Maybe it was placed somewhere, locked away, waiting for the exact right moment to return. That would change everything. Because instead of being a tragedy, its absence becomes a contingency, a deliberate choice made by a being who was always thinking thousands of years ahead. Some fans believe this theory makes the most sense. The Emperor wasn't just a warrior. He was a scientist, a manipulator, and a visionary. He understood the dangers of the warp, the fragile nature of human civilization, and the countless threats that lurked in the darkness of the galaxy. If he had a weapon that could have ended those threats, why wouldn't he have used it? The only logical reason is that it wasn't time yet. Maybe this weapon wasn't meant for the Great Crusade. Maybe it wasn't meant for the Horus Heresy. Maybe it was meant for something far worse, something that hasn't happened yet. And that brings us to his current state. The Emperor is functionally dead, kept alive by a machine that wasn't even designed for that purpose. His mind, his will, whatever remains of him, is scattered and fractured. If he did hide this weapon, does he even remember? Does he still have the power to set his old plans in motion? Or is it trapped, waiting for a signal that may never come? But here's where things get even more interesting. What if the weapon doesn't need him anymore? If it was designed as a final failsafe, then maybe it has its own conditions for activation. Maybe it's waiting for the Imperium to reach a certain level of crisis. Maybe it's responding to the growing threat of chaos, the encroaching Xenos empires, the slow collapse of the Astronomicon. Maybe the reason it hasn't been found yet is because the moment to use it hasn't arrived, but that moment is coming soon. The idea of a lost superweapon, hidden away for the final hour of mankind, isn't new to Warhammer. We've seen ancient technologies, hidden fleets, forgotten legions all suddenly re-emerge at critical moments. But what if this isn't just another piece of lost lore? What if this is the key to everything? If the Emperor truly planned for this weapon to return, then the Imperium as we know it might be standing on the edge of its greatest transformation, or its ultimate destruction. Because here's the thing. If this weapon returns, it won't be subtle. It will be something that shifts the entire balance of power in the galaxy. And if that happens, then the real question isn't just what this weapon was, but who will claim it first. Will it be the Imperium, still clinging to the past? Chaos, eager to corrupt whatever the Emperor once created? The Xenos, who might see it as a way to finally break mankind? Or something else, something we haven't even considered yet? If the Emperor really did plan for this, then his final move is still waiting to be played. And when that move happens, it won't just change the Imperium, it will change everything. Right now, Warhammer 40K is in a state of chaos unlike anything we've seen before. The galaxy has been ripped in half by the Great Rift, chaos is stronger than ever, and the Imperium is barely holding itself together. But with all these massive changes happening, it makes you wonder, could this be the moment when the Emperor's greatest lost weapon finally returns? Are we already seeing signs of something ancient, something forgotten, stirring in the darkness? There are plenty of reasons to think so. The return of Reboot Guilliman was a seismic event. For 10,000 years, the Imperium stagnated, decayed, and rotted from within. Then suddenly, out of nowhere, a Primarch returns. Not just any Primarch, but one who openly acknowledges that the Imperium is broken, that it was never supposed to be this way. And Guilliman is smart. He knows history. If anyone in the Imperium is capable of uncovering a long-lost secret, it's him. What if, in all his reforms, all his desperate attempts to save humanity from itself, he stumbles across something that was never meant to be found? Then there's the Adeptus Mechanicus and their so-called industrious ascendancy. The machine cult has always hoarded knowledge, hiding away lost technology, refusing to share their greatest discoveries even with the Imperium they claim to serve. But in recent years, they've become more aggressive, more willing to push the boundaries of what's acceptable. Belisarius Cawl alone has introduced technological advancements that would have been considered outright heresy a century ago. If anyone has the means, or the audacity, to uncover whatever this lost weapon was, it's the Mechanicus. What if they've already found something? What if their recent breakthroughs aren't just the result of hidden vaults on Mars, but something far older, something that even they don't fully understand? And then there's the biggest, most terrifying possibility of all, the Emperor himself. His state on the Golden Throne is changing. More and more, we hear stories of his psychic influence growing, of his will manifesting in ways it never has before. The living saints, the visions of those who stand in his presence, the growing belief that he is actively shaping events. It's all adding up to something. What if the Emperor is waking up? What if his power, long trapped in stasis, is beginning to break free? And if that's the case, what does it mean for whatever he once lost? Could this weapon, whatever it is, be tied directly to his return? Some fans believe that this lost weapon isn't just a relic of the past, but the key to the Imperium's future. That its return could signal a new age, a moment where the Emperor's true vision finally comes to light. But others fear the opposite, that this thing was hidden for a reason, that its reappearance could bring ruin instead of salvation. If it was meant to be erased from history, then uncovering it now, at a time when the galaxy is already on the brink, might be the worst possible outcome. And that's what makes this mystery so compelling. Because if this weapon does return, it won't be some minor footnote in history. It will be something that changes the game entirely. It could be the Imperium's last hope, or the final nail in its coffin. And in a setting like Warhammer 40K, where hope is always fragile and doom is always just around the corner, the scariest possibility of all is that we might not have a choice in the matter. Whatever was lost, whatever the Emperor once wielded, it may already be making its way back into the galaxy. And when it does, nothing will ever be the same again. So after all this speculation, all these theories, all these possibilities, what was the Emperor's greatest lost weapon? Was it a physical superweapon, a piece of forgotten technology so powerful that it had to be erased? Was it a living being, a Primarch, or an experiment that defied even its creator? Or was it something far more abstract, something that was never meant to be a weapon in the first place? An idea, a vision, a future that was stolen before it could be realized? The truth is, we may never know. But what we do know is that whatever it was, its absence changed the course of history forever. If this weapon had still been in play, would the Horus heresy have unfolded the same way? Would the Imperium have become the grim, decaying monstrosity that it is today? Or would things have been different? That's the real weight of this mystery. It's not just about what was lost, but what could have been. And maybe that's the scariest part of all. Because if this was something that could have prevented 10,000 years of stagnation, war, and suffering, then its disappearance isn't just some forgotten relic of the past. It's the reason the Imperium became the nightmare we know today. Some fans argue that whatever this weapon was, it was better off destroyed. That if it was truly lost, it was for a reason. That the Emperor, for all his flaws, knew what he was doing, and that whatever he discarded, whatever was taken from him, was something even he feared. But others believe the opposite, that this missing piece is the key to everything. That if it could be found, recovered, or understood, it might be the one thing that could change the galaxy's fate. And that's what keeps the speculation alive, because Warhammer 40K is a universe where hope is a distant memory, but mysteries like this remind us that things could have been different. And here's the real question. If this weapon still exists, if it's still out there somewhere, waiting, then who will find it first? The Imperium, broken and paranoid, barely holding itself together. Chaos, eager to corrupt anything once touched by the Emperor. Xenos forces who might see it as a means to reshape the galaxy in their own image. Or someone, or something we haven't even considered yet. In the end, this mystery is one of the many reasons Warhammer 40K remains so compelling. It's a setting where the past is always haunting the present, where the greatest secrets are buried so deeply that uncovering them might be more dangerous than leaving them forgotten. But that's why we love it. The unanswered questions, the endless possibilities, the idea that somewhere in the grim darkness of the far future, there might still be something capable of rewriting everything we thought we knew. So, what do you think? Was the Emperor's greatest lost weapon a machine, a person, an idea, or something even stranger? Let's talk about it in the comments. And if you enjoyed diving into this mystery, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on the next deep dive into the grim darkness of Warhammer 40K. there's always more to uncover. And as long as these questions remain, we'll be here to keep searching for the answers.